going on, guys? Welcome back to the BI Edge. Today, we are going into Australia's petroleum production leases, looking at exploration through expiry and investment trends. Australia's petroleum sector is entering a turning point. Billions of dollars in leases are approaching expiry. Foreign capital is reassessing its exposure, and state governments are quietly shaping the next phase of energy policy. Behind every wellhead, pipeline, and export terminal is a paper trail of production leases. And those leases tell a real story of where capital is flowing, when it's pulling back, and which regions are set to dominate the next investment cycle. In this episode, we'll break down petroleum production leases across Queensland, South Australia, and Western Australia, utilising Power BI to uncover what's driving exploration, where lease expires are clustering, and what this means for Australia's long-term energy strategy. What we're looking at here is the evolution of petroleum production leases across three of Australia's key energy producing states: Queensland, Western Australia, and South Australia. Each chart tracks total production leases approved over time, so we can see the total number of leases approved by year. This gives us a clear window into when exploration and capital investment intensified and when activity slowed down. Okay, so the more leases there are, these are the periods here where capital was intensified, and the periods where there was less leases is where there was a bit of an economic slowdown within this particular industry here. So we're going to start off here with Queensland. Okay, so we can see a long-term upward trend from the 1960s through to late 2010s here. As we can see, 2019 was the largest there with 30 production leases. Most of these were Santos, I believe. And we can sort of see that there's a sharp increase in approvals around 98 to 2001. Okay, so if I go to 98 here, big spike in 99, and then another big spike here, 2001 to 2002 was 9 again there. Okay, so late 90s, early 2000s, we saw a spike. And then again, 2017 to 2019, 13, 7, and then up to 30 there. And what this reflects is heavy LNG related exploration, much of it tied to Curtis Island LNG projects and CSG, coal seam gas expansion. If we move on next to South Australia, over here, production approvals show shorter bursts, notably 2008 here through to 2010, went up here. 2010 was the dip, and then 2008 to 2011 to 2012. Okay, and then again 2019 here, and then up here through COVID, and we've seen an upward sort of trend in this last sort of 5-year period. Now, this aligns with Cooper Basin redevelopment cycles and domestic gas supply policies. The map reveals the most leases cluster. If I just get the map up here, we can see that most leases cluster here around the Cooper Basin, which is up here, okay, and around the Peninsula, which is down here towards sort of Kangaroo Island. With expiry years between 2025 and 29, meaning a large proportion of producing leases are approaching renewal. Okay, so if I want to look at these leases here, I can quickly show you that Strike Energy expiring 25 here, and so forth. If I want to see what that is, I can see PEL 96. Okay, go in here, Impress, yep, okay, 26, and so I could just go through this, have a bit of a look here and go, yep, okay, what's expiring here? I've got my filter on 25 to 29, and I'm just having a look through the Cooper Basin there. These are all the producing leases here, and these are the operators that own these particular leases. So this is a really good way here for me to pinpoint, um, you know, what leases are expiring in the South Australian market. Okay, so moving on next to Western Australia. In Western Australia, activity remains a smaller in volume, but consistent. Steady approvals roughly every decade, peaking slightly in 2020 to 2022. Okay, you can sort of see here 22 sort of dropped a bit there, but I'd say 2020 to 2021 there. 21 was sort of their big year there with 4 new leases. Um, so um, WA's petroleum focus has always been offshore or in the Carnarvon Basin, so lower inland lease approvals are expected within this particular region. If we look at all 3 states here, across the 3, we can also see the operator base, names like Beach Energy, um, Santos Limited, Cooper Energy, QGC, and Denison Gas dominate here. So if I go over here, you can see Denison Gas is quite big in Queensland, so it's QGCs, it's Santos. We'll get to that shortly. Okay, so you're probably thinking, so what? What's the economic interpretation of all these numbers? So first, the expansion of leases in Queensland. So I'm just going to go to the Queensland map here. Over the past 2 decades reflects the massive inflow of foreign capital during the LNG build-out phase, particularly from Japanese, Chinese, and Malaysian energy companies partnering with local operators. This has created an export-led gas economy, but also raised Australia's exposure to foreign energy demand cycles. So, that's all about the long-term gas contracts, as we've mentioned in other videos. Meanwhile, South Australia's lease profile tells a different story. Smaller, more targeted, and focused on maintaining local gas supply rather than export volumes. With many leases expiring by 2025 to 29, SA faces a key policy window: either renew and reinvest, sustain domestic gas security, or transition resources towards hydrogen and storage infrastructure. Okay. Now we already know that SA is ahead of the curve with their renewables and using renewable energy sources with households. So it'll be an interesting one there to see whether what companies, if they decide to invest in more gas exploration. Coming back to Western Australia next. So Western Australia, by contrast, has maintained a more controlled pace. It benefits from state-level policies that reverse gas for local use, ensuring energy security and stabilising prices domestically. Economically, this strategy buffers WA from the same volatility that Queensland has faced with export-linked gas pricing. Okay, so they've benefited there from policies there for security on the local domestic market for their state. What's also clear is that lease expiry timelines are converging across SA and Queensland. Many leases are due for renewal within the next 5 years. All right, so if I have a bring this up here, we can see who's sort of expiring. This will directly influence capital investment decisions. Renewals will depend heavily on both commodity prices and policy direction, whether states favour extending fossil fuel production or shifting investment incentives towards renewables. So if we have a bit of a look here, we can see here, South Australia's expiring leases of production leases in petroleum has trended upwards here over the last sort of, between the period of 2019 here and 2029. We can see, all right, if I just want to know who's sort of expiring this year, and click on this and go, okay, they're the leases here on the left-hand side of the page. And I can see here that, these guys at Holloman Petroleum and their leases are coming up for an expiry soon. I want to look at Queensland here. I've sort of done a little forecast here where we're sort of going to sit as far as expiring leases, but if we look at where we are right now, 25, next year in 26, we've got 23 expiring. Okay, we'll have a bit of a look at where those leases are there. All right, if I wanted to see Santos here, we can see that they've trended down in Queensland in the petroleum-based market in terms of the number of the expiring leases. Um, so that may mean that they're holding their leases for a little bit longer. It could mean that they're not exploring as much as they were, or their production approval is slower. Could mean a few different things. And then Australia Pacific LNG, we can see that they're really trending up with how many leases are going to expire here over the next 30 years or so. Okay. And then QGC, I can have a bit of a look again. Santos Quadrant, okay, fairly flat. Over here in WA, I can look at Strike. Okay, we don't really have enough data here to know for sure, but if I just want to see, what's sort of expiring in the next few years, once again, you'd probably go to 26 here, and it's the EP 494 there that is going to expire. All right, so next we're going to answer the question of, so now what? What does this mean for Australia's energy future? Over the next decade, we can expect a capital reallocation phase across the petroleum industry as leases in SA and Queensland approach expiry. Operators will need to decide, do they reinvest in extending production or do they divest uh, towards low carbon projects? For Queensland, this means balancing export revenue with domestic energy availability. Renewals here will likely favour projects that can demonstrate lower emission intensity or integrate carbon capture solutions. For South Australia, coming expiries may attract smaller niche explorers or mid-tier domestic firms as large players pivot to cleaner energy portfolios. This creates opportunities for regional energy investment, but also risks if replacement capital doesn't flow fast enough. So just on that one quickly for South Australia, I've actually started doing up a South Australia critical minerals dashboard here. It's not finished yet, but if we just want to look at what's operating here and what's active, we can have a look at the different operations here, who the different operators are. I can come down here and I can have a look at the different commodities. So we can see that iron ore is quite big in the critical minerals for SA at the moment, salt, and then we come down here to gold. So Lawrence Ellis Seiss for an operator there, ML5237, gold and silver down here. Again, here we go, some copper. So what's that? Havilah Resources Limited. Okay, they've had it since 1990, expires in 2037. Right, more gold here. Okay, and what this allows us to do is it allows us to then contain copper through here, and we can see that these guys here got that lease there until the 2030s. So that kind of gives us a bit of an idea here as to who's active in the critical mineral sector in WA, and you can sort of the trends there of expiry years. So, we haven't really had a real lot of approved sort of leases there. Uh, that's okay. It's all part of different market cycles. Okay, so for Western Australia and for the slow and steady lease pattern that this presents, this suggests the state will continue prioritising domestic energy reliability over aggressive expansion within the gas market, maintaining stable royalties but avoiding overexposure to global volatility. At a national level, the alignment of lease expiries across state means 2025 to 2030 will be a defining window for petroleum investment policy in Australia. Decisions made in this period, whether to renew, regulate, or redirect capital, will shape not just state revenue, but also Australia's positioning in global energy markets. So before we finish up here, I'm just going to go through Queensland here on Queensland producing petroleum leases, okay? And we're just going to have a bit of a look here at, what was approved here in 24, so last year. Can have a look at the leases approved here, and I can see who are the big players here um, in 2024. And I can look here and I can go, right, Australia Pacific LNG expiring in 2054 there. I can click on this and I can go, these are the leases down here. I can see what the native title is here. This gives me a bit of an idea if I work in this particular industry, um, you know, what I need to be sort of looking at, if I'm selling product to the mining sector or, um, I'm looking at, potentially looking at other players and in the market and competitors and where they're sort of positioned and where their leases are. Or if I'm just an analyst or an engineer working for one of these companies and I just want to understand the market a little bit better and where others are placed. Okay. So basically this is just latitude and longitude taken from shape base files, converted into um, it, into Azure maps here. So if I look here, I can see where QGC is, for example, expiring in the 2040s. If I want to know, okay, well, this year, if there's one approved lease, it's probably a little old, but there was one there from Santos Limited, okay, and so forth. So this is really just about just getting in here and just learning where um, all the different operators are and who has majority of the market. So I can also use this here, and I can go from 2025 here to 2030. Who's expiring in Queensland, and I can see all the different competitors in the petroleum-based industry and what leases here are for renewal in what year across in terms of production. Okay. All right. So sum it up, Queensland shows us the scale of export-driven growth. South Australia highlights the upcoming expiry challenge and domestic energy trade-offs. So with Queensland, I just want to point one more thing out here. I'm just going to clear this. If you look at this here and you see that 2019, the total production leases in Queensland hit 30, have a look at how many of these were Santos Limited, Arrow, Santos Limited. You can see that there's a lot here, and these are the big players here in Queensland in more recent base times. Um, as I mentioned, Western Australia, it's different, it's policy driven control. Together, these patterns show an energy market at crossroads where production leases are not just legal instruments, but economic signals of where capital, technology, and policy are heading next. Australia's petroleum industry isn't declining, it's rebalancing. The next 5 years will determine whether it remains an LNG powerhouse or if it transitions into a more diversified, efficient, and strategically independent energy economy. If you like this video today, guys, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, or the thumbs up button. Post your comments and questions down below, and I'll give everyone who posts a comment a response. Appreciate your time. Cheers.